You are listening to the Red Pill Chronicles, where we help awakening souls deal with the blue pill world. I'm your host, John Dennison, and together we'll explore how to take an inner approach to your outer affairs so you can build a better life and a better world to live it in. Hello, my friend. Today we're going to be talking about a story that's in the news that seems to be getting everybody up in arms, and it's the death of Chief Justice Ginsberg and the fight over her replacement. Now, the fight actually hasn't started yet. We're in a calm before the storm, and it's very interesting to sit back and watch the battle lines forming and to see the shots that are taking place from each side before the actual battle itself begins. It's just like they're sort of sizing each other up and warming up for the main event. So what's it all got to do with you? Now that's really the question for all of us, isn't it? Because on the spiritual path, we know that everything that happens is created for our consumption. And what the purpose behind that consumption is to advance or give us tools to advance along our journey on the spiritual path. In other words, the events of our outer world, the ones you're watching in the news, are not just about what's going on in that world, but they are about what's going on in you and how you are going about living and creating the life that you're in now. So, we're going to look at the Ginsberg Follies and try to make some sense out of it, both from a societal standpoint and from a personal standpoint for those on the path. And bear with me if I seem to drift or get lost along the way, because I'm working from no notes today. I'm going back to my old style, which is off the top of my head, and I am anticipating that Spirit will fill me with the words that I need to give to you today. First, a quick review. The situations of our outer world not only show us the state of the world, they create catalysts by which we collectively and individually can work for our evolution. But whether those catalysts are actually serving to take us farther along the path and make us better or prove ourselves as more capable travelers, or you might say disciples of the light, remains to be seen. It's a test that we each have to answer in every moment. And right now, the moment is bringing us this very, very contentious atmosphere that we're in. And you could feel it. It's palpable. It's like there's a storm that's coming. It's on the horizon, but it's the middle of the night and you can't see it. You can't hear the rains or thunder yet, but you know it's coming. It's sort of like the time in the lead up to a hurricane where you know the storm's probably going to hit you, and it's just like a continual drumbeat of increasing pressure as you wait and prepare and anticipate all that could happen. And your fears begin to get the best of you, but you really don't have time to stop and focus on your fears. They're just kind of there beneath the surface. And you push them aside as you do what you got to do. But in the moments when you've finished all your work and you've collapsed, waiting for the storm to arrive, you're left to wonder, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my family, to my home, to the place that I live? And that's sort of what we're all wondering right now. What's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to our country? Understand that our common affairs, as I refer to the outer affairs, the affairs of our outer world, the politics, the pursuit of money and power. All of those affairs of the outer world create experiences by which individuals can interact with each other and begin to create the experiences by which they will go through the lives together what they're trying to accomplish. Now, the differences of what we're trying to accomplish in our lifetimes are as varied as we are. We don't each see things the same way, nor do we try to all go to the same place. That's sort of an individual destination and perspective that is totally unique to our place in the world. So how you see the Ginsberg Follies, and you can see I call it the Follies because I think it's sort of a circus that's going on, and I'm not sure who the ringmaster is, but I know that the circus is in town, and it's going to be hitting the airwaves here and filling all of our attention for a while, as it does its best to get us all worked up. And when you see these situations, it should be consider it like waving a flag in front of you saying, where are you? How are you responding to this? How are you engaging in those conversations, if you are? What sort of energy are you bringing to the table? The choices that you make and how to do that are really going to determine a lot about the nature of the so-called lessons or tests that you receive, the catalysts that are going to be created for you from here on out. But understand that your response is not really something that you have control over at the moment. It's more one that you need to observe and say, well, how is this serving me? Now, I can give you the tools to try to change the responses and to change yourself, but it's not really my place to try to suggest that you change. You were created the way you are for a reason. It is bringing you a perspective. That is setting forth the beliefs, or setting the beliefs that you have in motion about what your world is and what your life is and how it all should look and work together. But right now, you see in that outer world, you see a deep division between different aspects of the players involved. And on the one hand, you have this Democratic side, or the Democrat side. They're not democratic by any stretch of the imagination, where they are totally opposed to a replacement and will do anything within their power to stop it and to keep that seat from being filled. Whereas on the Republican side, they're going to do everything they can to get that seat filled and get it still filled as quickly as possible, because they anticipate all kinds of shenanigans coming from the Democrats with this election. So they think that they need to have those seats in place and have that new person there so that they can avoid any potential locking up of the Supreme Court by 4-4 vote. And that way, so-called, avoid a constitutional crisis. Understand that both of these positions are being presented to you this way to get you riled up, or to get everyone else riled up if you're not, and to get you to give them your support at the election coming in November. And so they're going to keep hammering on the issues that they think you are going to respond to. Right now, the issue that seems to be arising from Ginsberg's death is one that's really been avoided in our country for the last, 30, 40, I don't know when Roe v. Wade was, 76? So it's 45 years or so, we're going to be looking at the issue of abortion. Not just us today, but those who are fighting are going to be fighting primarily over the issue of whether women should be able, at their own behest, to terminate a pregnancy. Now, the Democrats have done their best to stretch that ability to terminate the pregnancy from beyond the first trimester that the Supreme Court originally outlined in Roe, versus to basically even up to and even beyond the moment of delivery of the child. They want the ability that if there is an abortion that is failed, that they can come back later and take the child, that there is no protection for a child of a failed abortion. And they want the ability to be able to terminate advanced pregnancies for various reasons. And believe me, the fights over these terminations, these abortions, are not very pretty, because both sides get really nasty, and they show stuff that's really meant to upset you and play upon your heartstrings and get you so upset one way or another that you're just ready to fight. And you have your beliefs on that issue of abortion, as do I. As everyone does. I don't know that any of us could live in this country for the last 45 years and not have had to at least confront a discussion of some sort on abortion and what our stand is on it. So, and this is where we are going to put our focus today, because in these Ginsberg Follies, the main thing that is going to be used to try to tweak your emotions, to try to rile you up, to get you dragged into their side, whichever side it is this abortion issue. So we're going to look at you and your relationship to the issue, because it's important that you, as a light worker, begin to look at yourself and see what's going on underneath the surface. That it's not enough to just know that this stuff's happening, but it's to begin to look at yourself and try to figure out why it's happening. What is the cause within you that is allowing these emotions and these triggers to exist, that allow you to be played like this? And believe me, it's all a manipulation. Because even behind both sides, there are those who are goading on both sides, who are funding both sides, maybe even directing both sides, because they benefit from the chaos, not from the resolution of the problem or moving us forward together. But we're talking about you today, and what this all has to do with you. What do the Ginsberg Follies have to do with you? Well, right now, you're getting the chance to evaluate the different names that are being brought forward in light of your interests and your perceptions of how the country should approach the problems that's before us. We all do. We all tend to see it through our own lens, and I'm not criticizing it. I want you to know that whatever and however you see it is okay with me. But what matters is that you use the way that you see it to advance yourself, to expand yourself so you become more than you are. Now, how does that relate to abortion? How does that relate to this termination of a pregnancy? We've gone to great lengths to try to define the inception of life. And we as a society have not been able to agree upon it, primarily because the science, or at least the medicine of prenatal care, is such that fetuses of very young, very tender ages, maybe as low as 6 weeks or so, can sometimes be saved and kept alive and raised to become viable children. And believe me, the wonders of neonatal care are not to be poo-pooed. They are important. Any parent that's ever had a child that's either come premature or come with problems that had to go into a neonatal nursery for treatment understands the angst that the parents go through and the hardship that the child, just born into this world, has to face under the lights for days, weeks, maybe even months on end, that they have very little human contact, that they're picked up for maybe a few minutes a day. You get to hold them and lay them back down. And the parents are lucky that they can even be there in the room with them. So, the issue of viability is fluid. We can't really say that a child, when it reaches or a fetus, when it reaches a certain age or a number of weeks, is or is not viable. The law has presumed it, but at various points in the way. In some states, they've been fighting over life begins at conception. At others, it's later on. And the reason they're fighting over when life begins is because that's really the issue is, well, when are you allowed to take a life? If you are a woman who has found herself pregnant and does not want to have a baby. Well, setting aside issues of personal responsibility and morality, and both of those are really important issues that if you are involved in such a situation, you're going to be weighing for yourself. But just looking at the overall concept as a society that looks at the issue of abortion, we have decided, or at least the court has decided, to recognize the ability of a woman to get an abortion, not just because of a personal right of privacy that has been inferred by the Supreme Court, which I'm glad to see that they came up with the right of privacy. Unfortunately, that right of privacy does not exist under the Constitution. So it remains to be seen whether that right of privacy will continue to be expanded on by future court decisions. It really hasn't been. They've been looking in other directions and hanging their head elsewhere. So I would not be surprised to see a future court switch the foundation from Roe, from privacy, to something else. And only because the privacy issue is too nebulous, and it does not, and it creates a standard that presumes an absolute. But from a standpoint of pregnancy and abortion, we have many different competing interests here. But the only one that seems to get any attention in the news is either the so-called right of the mother. This is a right that was created by the Supreme Court, not the Constitution. Inferred from the Constitution, supposedly. But I'm not going to get into the legal arguments on either side of that. But from our standpoint, we live in a society that somehow has failed to come up with a standard to deal with this issue of when a birth or a pregnancy can and or should be terminated. It has become a very, very open and bitter fight. And unwanted pregnancies are not desirable for anyone. And those that suffer them and the children that are born from those often come with a high price. But the price of those who choose abortion is just as high, because their actions can haunt them for the rest of their lives too. There is no absolute clear answer I can give you, just as you're not going to get one by watching the SCOTUS hearings, and you're not going to get one by looking in your own conscience, because from that standpoint, it is all relative. Making a decision from the standpoint of the mother, for the convenience of the mother, for the benefit of the mother, by the mother, is an act of service to self. There is no other way to put it. It's very, very hard to justify the taking of a life, even one in vitro, which is, or in utero, which is going to allow us to justify that death unless we first decide that our lives are more important than the life of that child. The state has determined that it has an interest in preserving life. That is the reason that they have tried to create governmental restrictions on abortion and why it was illegal before Roe versus Wade. Because there was an interest of the state in preserving life, and the state of the law was, before that, life begins at conception. Or at least I think it was. Not having practiced in that area, I'm not sure. But as I understood it when I was living back in those days, it seemed to be. But from a societal standpoint, we have changed that determination and made it to be one that's never been resolved. Because we are wanting the mother's interest to be primary over those of either the child or of the state. Of course, I never ever hear anyone talking about the interests of the father. I'm sorry, but as a dad, I think we should have interests too. How those need to be represented, how those need to be determined or judged, I have no clue. But I know fathers that have been just as traumatized over having their children aborted as they were about having unwanted children born. So there's no agreement. This is one of the things in human relationship that men and women, when they decide to engage in conjugal activities, they inherently know that somewhere in the back of their minds there's always a risk of pregnancy and that they're going to have to confront each other on what your views are on the raising of a child, or whether a child is to be raised, or whether that child is life in utero is determined to not have a future because it interferes with the future or the current life of the mother. I am not in a position to make a judgment on that. This is, as I said, this is a really, really tough decision. And I am sorry, but I just don't even have enough information to make a decision what should be happening in the Follies in terms of what kind of a justice should be sitting on the Supreme Court. I personally have been one throughout my life that I have been a strict constructionist, even back to the days of the Warren Court in the 60s, when they really started legislating from the bench, and it started 50 years of judicial legislation. Being a lawyer, my job was to interpret the law was written and to practice it, and to apply those laws to the Constitution as I would see it, as I would interpret it, and as the laws were and courts had interpreted it. So I could see that the issues of personal consent and societal interests have always been on a collision course, and it is one that we will be on for a long time. And I, being one who's strongly committed to free will, would normally want to leave that decision to those that were involved in the pregnancy, rather than me telling them how to respond. But I know that is not how our world works. Our country wants to stick its nose into everybody's business and make those determinations for us. And again, we as a society, we've never really decided how we relate to the issues of taking of a life. Well, if you choose to take the life in utero through an abortion, is that murder? If it is it justifiable? Is it a justifiable homicide? It's certainly not self-defense, though the defense of one's future life may be seen in some ways as a self-defense. But this is something that every person has to wrestle with, both in terms of how to deal with the follies and the positions that your side's going to be taking in these hearings that'll be starting up here soon. But it's important for you in your life to decide what your relationship is to life, period. Your life, other lives, lives in utero, lives in vitro, lives post-mortem. Because that relationship that you set as a soul is what's going to determine how your life unfolds. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that God is against or for abortion or death. I don't know. I'm not God. But I do know that the issue has become so divisive and so contentious that just the mere bringing up of the subject is enough to set people off to shouting at each other. Yet, none of them may be pregnant. It's like a moot discussion for an event that may or may not ever happen. Or that perhaps this happened in the past, and you want to make sure that the ability to do that is or is not preserved for the future. So abortion is going to be one of those issues for you to look into your soul and to say, what is my relationship to life, to God, and to whether I have come into this life to face these tough choices and grow from them, or to shrink from them and just take the expedient and easy way out. I don't think anyone ever takes the expedient and easy way out, because there is no easy way out of an abortion situation. An unwanted pregnancy it's got to be hell. Hell, even wanted pregnancies are hard. And to be stuck with carrying a child that you don't want, particularly one that may have been coming as a result of a rape or a situation which was less than loving, could be very, very hard. So you have to make those choices. But what I'm not asking you to make choices or not to make choices. I'm asking you to look at what is going on inside you that forms the basis or the framework upon which those choices are going to be made. Those reasons, those underlying conditions and causal factors are why you are holding the position that you are holding. Are you taking that position in response to a personal situation of your own? Is it because of pain, some sort of pain? Is it because of some sort of effort till you want to help somebody? You need to understand these things about yourself, because some of the things that you're carrying from the past may not serve you very well in this future that you want to create for yourself. Now, do we want to have a future where children don't get the chance to exist, that they are terminated before they're born? I don't know. We do now. It's sort of a crapshoot. You get pregnant as to whether you're going to have a baby or not. A lot of times that depends upon your socioeconomic status. Other times it depends upon the circumstances of how you got pregnant. And we know that, again, a lot of it has to do with the emotional and physical and financial maturity of the individuals involved. It's easy to say what one's responsibility is. It's easy to say one should go take one action or another. But none of us are in the shoes of the people that are involved. But does that mean that our inability or the difficulty of the situation and the difficulty of the decision mean that we should go to war with somebody who feels differently about it than we do? Are we going to take their position and project it into the future to see whether it's going to benefit us or hurt our possibilities for future activity? Society has had a really hard time dealing with this issue both of life when life starts as well as when life ends, because some people believe in euthanasia, other people believe it's a crime to take a life, and society pretty much has decided for years that taking of a life, either through suicide or through homicide, even an assisted homicide of like a medical necessity of someone who has a protracted illness, is wrong and should be a crime. That's the decision that society has made. It's not mine. Yet, I am forced to live in a society that has already made those kind of decisions for me. And the situation with the abortion issue and Roe versus Wade is that the Supreme Court made that decision for you, not the People's House of the legislature, which is supposed to be making your laws. It was a group of old men, and I believe there was one woman, maybe two on the court at the time, that decided for you. And whether you like their decision or not, that's the way it goes, and you're forced to live with it. But now, everybody's afraid or hopeful that some new justice is going to change the balance of power and make it possible that abortion is going to either be outlawed or opened up. And they're fighting over which type of judge is going to go in there. Well, we had 50 years of liberal judicial legislation. I should say legislating from the bench. And now the pendulum seems to be, or have swung back the other way, where more of a conservative bent seems to be swinging through the land, where people are trying to hold on to some of the tradition and beliefs that they've had, that they see what others are trying to force, and they don't like those changes. And so there's a culture clash going on now to see who is going to be primary in terms of where our culture and our society goes from here. And that's going to be playing out for a while now. And I think ultimately it's going to be somewhat different than what we look and what it looks like now, and won't be like either of them want it to be. It's going to end up being a merger of the two. But there are things in our society that we have not resolved. And underlying abortion is the issue of life, is the issue of what is our relationship to life. And what is the issue of our relationship to God and the source of the life? And does that have any influence upon whether we should or can take a life? And if so, under what circumstances? These are tough choices for which there seem to be no right answers. Yet we have to find a way to come up with an answer that works in a society that's going to allow us all to live together and at least coexist peacefully, so we can move forward to whatever the future holds. But right now, this is the battle line in a war between the two sides that is escalating, and tied to the other escalations from COVID and the riots, the Black Lives Matter riots, and the situations with the Chinese, that people are just boiling over with emotions, and they're just looking to fight with somebody. They got to get this out of them, and if they don't get these energies out, they're going to just explode. Oh, yeah, well, we do see some of that, don't we, in the rage that we're seeing some people exhibiting at some of these events. Anyway, you got to decide for yourself where you come down on this. But what I want you to do is to use the situation to see, well, how is it exactly you feeling inside about it, and what's causing you to be that way? Is it going, and is it serving you to take you where you want to go? I mean, if your job is to return to the light, is the taking of a life the way you intend to get there? Perhaps the taking of the life in utero is being done to Create a catalyst by which you will begin to value other lives more. Sometimes people have abortions when they're younger, and their attitudes change about them when they get older. That they realize that maybe they didn't make the right choice when they were younger. And so they switch their positions. At other times, you get people that totally switch just because of the fact of the political expediency of the matter. Because at this point now, it's become sort of Republicans are against abortion and Democrats are for abortion. But it doesn't need to be a political decision. It's not made politically when you get pregnant. It doesn't need to be a political decision now, but we've turned it into a political decision because we want to fight. And those people that are fighting for power are afraid that we might have to make up our own minds on these situations without their influence, without them telling us what to think or what to do. So they use their media buddies to rile us up and set us in motion so that we go out and fight with each other. The giant conflict propaganda machine that is there just to tweak your fear and stir your hatred. Our country doesn't benefit from that. We don't benefit from that. Who does? Somebody must, besides the advertisers and the people that are putting on the shows of the TV and radio stations, or the newspapers, or blogs. They benefit from your upset. They want you to stay angry and afraid and riled up because it keeps you coming back for more. And right now we're all supposed to get up in arms about this issue of a Supreme Court justice. I don't know how many Supreme Court justice battles I've seen in my lifetime, but there have been a lot. And I can tell you that they have been getting more and more and more contentious. And I can tell you that from a standpoint of the civility of the actions, Republican nominees have faced a much tougher go-round than the Democratic nominees, just because the Democrats don't play fair. Not that there is any fairness in this, but they're going to dig up and use whatever dirt that they can, and they will draw every possible inference that they can make. And they'll even manufacture evidence against the nominees in order to prove their point, even if that evidence isn't true, such as we saw with Kavanaugh and back at several other points in the past. But again, all this has to do with you and me. It has to do with the position we're taking and whether we allow ourselves to get dragged into the fight, whether we allow ourselves to get wrapped up in the emotions of the arguments and the positions and the beliefs and perceptions that they're all spewing out at us, or whether we're caught up in the decision that our side's got to win and our future's lost if we don't. If you get caught up in those energies, well, enjoy it. Enjoy the ride. But you're riding the dragon. It's only going to leave one place. It's the greater and greater and greater energies within the fight. But understand, this is duality, and duality is not just the way you are right now, because there is a part of you somewhere that doesn't feel that way. And you're going to have to reconcile the two. Those two aspects of you are going to have to move forward together if you're going to make it past ascension. If you're going to move into a fifth dimension and you're going to be able to work toward unity consciousness. Because the house divided cannot stand. Well, if you're having on both sides of an issue, it's going to be hard for you to stand. But guess what? You are on both sides of this issue. You have to choose for yourself which one you're going to be on in the moment. But consciousness allows you to see that the seeds of the other side are also in you. that you may both be for and against abortion at the same time. You may be for and against a jurist that liberally construes the law and Constitution in order to arrive at a just result. Or you may find yourself feeling that, no, the law was there for a reason, and we have to follow the law and construe it as narrowly as possible so it can continue to serve as many people as possible rather than changing it to conform to the needs of a few. There are lots of ways you can see everything that's going on. And from a societal standpoint, this is just the stirring of the pot that's going to allow other changes to take place. We have to kind of clean the garage. I use cleaning the garage as my go-to description of what's happening in the world, because when I clean my garage, or I start with a bad situation and I make it worse. I dump everything out. I may move everything out into the driveway, sometimes into the yard. I'll start separating into stacks and things. And then I have to figure out what else, when I've done everything and gotten rid of everything I think I want to get rid of, and have the bare bones core of the garage set up so I can start putting stuff back. Then I got to decide, well, what do I move in? What do I take with me? What am I going to make as part of this garage so it's going to look the way I want when it's done? Well, that's kind of what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to clean the garage of our society. We're trying to get rid of the beliefs and practices that aren't serving us to move us forward together. But right now, in these times of polarity, each side is fighting not to go together, but to go apart, separate, to go their way and to tell the other ones to go to hell. And that's part of the process. But if you'll recall, the law of one says that we have two paths that we generally take to get our way back to the light. One is service to self, and the other is service to others. Abortion is clearly service to self. Perhaps we might couch it and say, well, that child's not going to have a good life or whatever, but it's not up for us to say whether it's a good life or not, because we're not giving them the opportunity to even have that life if we abort the child. But then again, if we decide to have that child, we're basically aborting our lives to live a life that has been thrust upon us by the winds of fate. Now, I'm a believer in fate, that there is certain activities or certain experiences that we have come into life to get, and so that life is going to go about trying to create those for us. Predestination might be a way of looking at it. Kismet. But nevertheless, we have to make the choices that will allow that fate to unfold. We have to decide for ourselves what we are going to do with regard to this issue of relationship to other beings. If we are to evolve toward the light, this relationship and the interaction is what develops our spirit that allows us to move through the dimensions. And if we break away from those relationships and or don't want to deal with those that bring any kind of friction into the situation, then we're denying ourselves a valuable set of experiences that may come from those. Well, right now it looks like our world is going toward a separation from each other. Just look at lockdown and the COVID response. Separation in our politics, because we now have this left-right paradigm that just see everything so totally different, and that they absolutely despise anybody who doesn't see it exactly the same way they do. And through this, and yet somehow in this separation, we've got to decide, well, are we trying to move forward together? Or are we trying to end this experiment in co-creation, of a world that can serve everybody as they want to be served and not as someone else tells them to be served. As you know, one of the big issues in the news these days is the CCP from China and and their efforts to basically control the world. They certainly are trying to break up American hegemony in terms of where they want to be the dominant player to control the world. Again, it is the issue of trying to control the future. But in the way that it's unfolding, both with the CCP and through the government tech political group alliances that we see here in the West, is that speech is used as a weapon. It is squelched, is silenced, it is suppressed. That individuals are not free to make their own choices, that they have to decide and make this and to go and do things that the government or other powers that be allows and puts their imprimatur on. This is where the future of our world is going. Human freedom is important. But the decision of human freedom starts with what is your personal relationship to your life and to the lives of others. And if the relationship to your life, does your life take primacy over the lives of others? Or do you have to find a way to go forward there where your life and other lives can be served, even if it means a detriment to you? That's a choice you have to make. I'm not asking you to sacrifice yourself. I'm asking you to know yourself, to decide, can you look at the situation objectively and make a conscious decision, free of the biases of the needs of your life or of the way that you've created yourself so far. This is just a little bit of what the Ginsberg Follies are offering you. The chance to see yourself and to understand yourself and to choose how you are going to evolve from here. To choose what it means to honor life, what it means to honor yourself or to honor God. All three of those are important. God is everywhere. God is us. God is in those that we hate. So if God is in those that we hate and the things that we don't, then how is it that we are going to try to move forward with those aspects of God within our reality? Or are we going to say, well, we only want the positive aspects that fit nicely within what makes us feel good right now? I don't have an answer. All I have are questions. Questions that you have to decide. As you are watching these hearings, as you are seeing the political grandstanding unfold on both sides of the aisle, as you are muttering under your breath at one side or the other or something somebody says or does, and how terrible they are and how much you hate them, remember, you're both going to the same place. And somehow, you both have to find a way to get there. If you're going there by service to self, it's going to be a long road. But if you're getting there by service of others, then you're going to have to figure out, what does this situation have to do with me and the relationship that I need to have, that my soul wants me to have, with the other expressions of the God source that are within my reality? And that first expression that we're focused up on today is that new life that is, or is not, going to be snuffed out based upon the decisions that are made in these hearings. You've got to decide the position for yourself. I just hope that you can do so consciously, but detached from the results and the emotions that are associated with it, so that your outcome will be free of the distortions of your own inner conditions. Have fun watching the hearings. We'll have more on this as we go along. But in any event, I hope what I said today made a little bit of sense. All I'm trying to do is plant a seed and make you think. You have to decide where to go from here. You have to decide how the reality is that you want to create is going to unfold. Or at least how your beliefs are going to fit in to the reality that is unfolding around you right now. Because you're either going to be trying to find ways to harmonize with yourself with that reality, or you're going to find yourself at war with it. And right now everybody wants us to be at war. They want to fight. I'm going to ask you to give peace a chance. Try to understand what goes on in you. Try to see the energies that are building up and dissipate them before they get to a point of needing to boil over to explode. Use this situation to advance your journey through greater knowing of yourself and greater understanding and acceptance of the people that you disagree with. It's only by finding a way to come together that we are going to be able to get where we want to go. Remember, the goal is where we go one, we go all. And that's back to the source of oneness. You are so much more than you know. And I suspect you're going to start to see some of it as you look at why you feel the way you do to these contentious events that are filling the news. Enjoy the show. I'm John. Go with love. You have been listening to the Red Pill Chronicles, where we help awakening souls move in a better way through a blue pill world. For more information, visit us at peaceoptions.com to explore how you can find your peace through knowing yourself and following your inner voice. Or at missionlaunch.com, where we offer coaching and consulting to help you make the difference in your world.